tragedy for actor Tommy Lee Jones and his family. We've learned that his 34-year-old daughter, Victoria Jones, was found dead at San Francisco's posh Fairmont Hotel.
Tommy Lee Jones has spent decades playing tough, unshakable men on screen, but nothing could prepare him for this. At 79, the Hollywood legend faces the heartbreak no parent should ever endure: the death of his beloved daughter. What incident led to the death of Victoria Lee?
Actor Tommy Lee Jones was found dead inside of a San Francisco hotel on New Year's Day.
How has this unimaginable loss changed the man behind the stoic Hollywood persona? Join us as we uncover the tragic story behind the Hollywood legend and the personal grief that has shaken his world to its core. The tragedy that broke Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy has always been seen as the tough, no-nonsense guy. On screen, he's the man who never shows too much emotion. But as 2026 began, the 79-year-old acting legend found himself facing something no amount of experience could have prepared him for: the sudden loss of his daughter. On New Year's Day, Victoria Jones, Tommy Lee Jones's 34-year-old daughter, was found dead at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. Emergency responders were called to the hotel around 3:14 a.m. after reports of a medical emergency in a hallway. Paramedics arrived quickly, but despite CPR efforts by people nearby, Victoria was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities revealed there were no obvious signs of foul play, and the San Francisco Medical Examiner is still investigating the cause of death.
Another tragic death has now shaken Hollywood. Victoria Jones, the daughter of Academy Award-winning actor Tommy Lee Jones.
As of now, no official cause has been released. Tommy Lee Jones and his representatives have also remained silent, asking for privacy in what is clearly an unimaginable moment for the family. For someone like Jones, who has spent decades keeping his personal life far from public view, the loss feels especially heavy. He's never been a celebrity who overshares. He doesn't do emotional interviews or public breakdowns. So, the silence surrounding this tragedy only makes it more painful. Victoria Kafka Jones was born on September 3, 1991, in San Antonio, Texas. She was the daughter Tommy had with photographer Kimberly Clofley, his second wife. The couple got married in 1981 and divorced in 1996, but they shared 2 children together, Victoria and her older brother, Austin Leonard Jones, now 43. Despite growing up with a famous father, Victoria's childhood was relatively private. She wasn't constantly paraded on red carpets or pushed into fame. Still, like many kids raised around creativity, she eventually found her way into acting. Her most recognizable role came in 2002 when she appeared in Men in Black 2 as a child alien, ironically sharing the screen with her own dad. The movie was a massive hit, and for an 11-year-old, it was a pretty big introduction to Hollywood.
Public health is Dr. White.
You boys must not have much of a home life.
She later appeared in The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, a gritty, critically praised film directed by and starring Tommy Lee Jones himself. Victoria also had a small television role on One Tree Hill in 2003, showing she could hold her own in dramatic scenes. While she never became a household name, those early roles suggested potential. People close to her say she wasn't obsessed with fame and often felt the pressure of being Tommy Lee Jones's daughter. She reportedly explored creative interests beyond acting and preferred staying out of the spotlight. As she got older, Victoria pulled back from public life. Like many former child actors, she seemed to be figuring things out away from the cameras. Her brother Austin chose a similar path, keeping a low profile and living largely outside Hollywood's glare. Tommy Lee Jones had rarely spoken about his children, but when he has, the pride was obvious.
Would you stop that?
What?
That thing is gonna give her brain cancer or something.
Never heard her before. Look, we got to get all the doors closed off.
In one rare interview years ago, he called them his greatest achievement, words that now carry a devastating weight. Losing a child is every parent's worst nightmare. Losing one suddenly without warning is something that never truly heals. But the truth is, behind the cameras and the fame, Victoria faced battles the fans never saw, struggles that may have played a role in her untimely death. What challenges was she fighting in private? Struggles behind the headlines. In the year leading up to her death, Victoria Jones had been quietly dealing with a string of legal troubles that, once made public, fueled speculation about what she may have been going through behind closed doors. In April 2025, Victoria was arrested in Napa County on multiple charges, including obstructing a peace officer, being under the influence of a controlled substance, and possession of narcotics. She was later released on bail. Just a month later, in May, she was arrested again, this time in Santa Cruz County, on similar charges, though few details were made public. She also pleaded not guilty to those charges, reflecting a recurring pattern of clashes with law enforcement connected to substance use. By June 2025, things escalated further when Victoria was charged with domestic battery and domestic violence involving an elder. She pleaded not guilty and was released pending trial.
I think it was the right idea because it gives some focus to the character. It puts the character squarely in historical.
A report from the Napa County Sheriff's Office details that deputies responded to a 911 call from a woman who sounded upset. When they arrived at a residence on Las Amigas Road, they encountered Victoria Jones. She told deputies that she had called 911 by mistake. However, the deputy noted signs including dried blood around her nose and white residue on her tongue. Her husband reportedly told the deputies that Victoria had been using cocaine for the previous 2 days. 2 months later, Victoria was arrested again, this time at Napa's Carneros Resort and Spa. Court documents show that she was charged with misdemeanor domestic battery. Authorities alleged that during an argument over her drinking and she had slapped her spouse twice in the face. In both incidents, she pleaded not guilty to the charges. Officials have been careful to stress that no direct connection has been established between these legal issues and her death, and the investigation remains ongoing, and the circumstances surrounding her death remain under review. Police have classified the death as non-suspicious, citing no visible signs of trauma or criminal activity. Toxicology and autopsy results are expected to take weeks, which is standard procedure. NBC Bay Area later confirmed her identity through police sources. As news of her passing spread, tributes poured in quietly but steadily. Fans revisited her old roles, leaving messages on her IMDb page and social media. Mental health organizations urged compassion.
Filmmakers' vision to real life.
Reminding the public that headlines rarely show the full human story. For Tommy Lee Jones, this loss cuts deeper than any role he's ever played. As the world moves forward into 2026 with resolutions and hope, he is left navigating grief, privately, painfully, and far from the cameras, mourning a daughter whose life ended far too soon. How has the Lee's family responded to this sudden loss? A strong man brought to his knees. In the days following the death of his daughter, Tommy Lee Jones and his family quietly acknowledged the overwhelming wave of support they received. The family expressed gratitude for the kind words, thoughts, and prayers sent their way, while also asking for privacy as they grieve. The brief message, shared through page 6, reflected a desire to mourn away from public scrutiny during an intensely painful time. Shortly afterward, Tommy Lee Jones was seen in public for the first time since Victoria's sudden passing, and the sight raised serious concern among those who saw him. The 79-year-old actor appeared visibly shaken and physically unsteady while walking in San Antonio, Texas, supported closely by his wife, Dawn Laurel Jones. Observers noted that he seemed to be limping and leaning heavily on her, a striking contrast to the tough, self-possessed image that defined much of his career. The appearance came just days after confirmation that Victoria had been found unresponsive in the early hours of New Year's Day. Since the tragedy, Jones has largely withdrawn from public view. Those familiar with the situation say the loss has deeply affected him, both emotionally and physically. Known for his resilience and private nature, he has reportedly been overwhelmed in a way that even decades of personal discipline and professional experience could not prepare him for.
He's come to the Villa Capri because he's thinking about buying it.
The grief, according to sources close to the family, has left him noticeably fragile. Concerns about Jones's health have grown as images of his unsteady movement and distant demeanor spread. While no medical details have been confirmed, the visible strain has fueled worry among fans and peers alike. For many, the images underscore the devastating toll that profound grief can take, especially at an advanced age. Tommy Lee Jones has seen his share of struggles and heartbreak. Even before losing his daughter, his life was full of challenges and tough moments. Let's take a look at how it all happened. The lead in a tough life. For Tommy Lee Jones, the passing of his daughter has reopened a lifetime shaped by hardship, emotional distance, and endurance. It is a grief that cuts deeper because it arrives after decades spent playing men who carried pain in silence. Now, that silence belongs to him. Tommy Lee Jones was born in San Saba, Texas. His childhood offered little emotional shelter. His parents, Lucille Marie Jones and Clyde C. Jones, lived demanding lives and endured a turbulent marriage that eventually ended, and that instability left a lasting mark. Jones grew up learning that relationships could fracture without warning, and that survival often meant holding things in rather than reaching out. Raised in Midland, Texas, he came of age in an environment where toughness was expected and vulnerability was rarely allowed. His mother worked multiple jobs to keep the family afloat, while his father labored in oil fields and on ranches. There was no safety net, only routine and responsibility. Of Cherokee descent, Jones inherited a legacy of resilience, but that resilience came at the cost of emotional openness. A scholarship carried him away from home to St. Mark's School of Texas in Dallas. It was an opportunity, but also another separation. Surrounded by wealth and comfort that were not his own, Jones remained on the margins.
Just learn the words the night before, decide what the director wants to see. And
he succeeded through discipline, not ease, reinforcing a lifelong pattern. Progress achieved through distance. Long before fame, Tommy Lee Jones was already known as difficult, intense, and unpredictable. Those who knew him as a teenager did not describe a future movie star polishing a persona. They described a young man already carrying weight, anger, and volatility well beyond his years. At St. Mark's School, Jones stood apart from his peers.
Trying to say, I can't identify a message, but I think, because McCormack's not a simple-minded writer.
He was moody and brooding, capable of sudden shifts in temperament that unsettled the people around him. He could erupt into laughter that felt uncontrolled and unsettling, then turn cold just as quickly if something struck him the wrong way. Friends sensed danger beneath the surface, as if he were constantly holding something back. The hardness people later associated with his screen presence was already there, fully formed. To some, his behavior came off as eccentric. To others, it felt like something deeper, an intensity that refused to conform.
But his relationship with his wife is not really very vital.
Even among high-achieving classmates, Jones operated by his own rules. Stories followed him into Harvard, where his behavior only reinforced the idea that he was different, unpredictable, and uninterested in fitting in. He did not seek approval, and he did not soften himself to make others comfortable. In 1965, he entered Harvard College on need-based aid. The gap between where he came from and where he stood widened even further. Jones focused on work, not belonging. He studied English literature, drawn to dark, morally complex material. His senior thesis explored themes of faith.
20 years to learn how to act. And that's probably true.
And suffering, reflecting an inner world shaped by restraint and doubt. He graduated cum laude in 1969, accomplished but emotionally guarded. At Harvard, Jones also played guard on the football team, embracing physical punishment alongside academic pressure. He was part of the undefeated 1968 Crimson team and played in the legendary Harvard-Yale game that ended in a last-minute tie. The game became historic, but for Jones, it was another lesson in endurance, absorbing pain, giving everything, and moving on without fanfare. After graduation, he moved to New York City to pursue acting.
At that time, I lived in New York City. The time you talk about the soap opera, that would have been starting about 1970.
With no guarantees and no backup plan, his early career was defined by struggle. He took small Broadway roles and minor film parts, often overlooked. Years on a daytime soap opera provided stability, but little fulfillment. Success came slowly and never erased the uncertainty that shaped his early adulthood. That edge never faded with age. If anything, it hardened. The volatility remained, stripped of youth, but sharpened by confidence. His bluntness became legend.
Try to create a stand-in, or find a stand-in for the trans Pecos.
He spoke directly, often harshly, and showed little patience for behavior he didn't respect. To many, his sharp wit felt indistinguishable from hostility. Critics later observed that Jones was especially convincing at playing men who were angry, restrained, or morally rigid. The reason was simple: he wasn't pretending. Profiles written about him suggested that what audiences saw on screen was not an act, but an extension of who he had always been. He did not perform menace or authority. He carried it naturally. Even in professional settings, Jones rarely filtered himself. Colleagues learned quickly that he had little tolerance for what he viewed as excess, ego, or foolishness. His intensity could freeze a room. For some, it was intimidating. For others, it was simply who he was.
Arnold does a lot of thinking about the state of his marriage. He's pretty complacent.
A man shaped by early instability who never learned or chose to soften. Yet beneath that rough exterior was not cruelty for its own sake, but control. Jones built his life around discipline and boundaries, keeping emotions tightly contained. That control defined his work, his reputation, and his personal life. It also explains why he guarded the few things that mattered most to him. What reputation does Tommy Lee have in the entertainment industry, and why did he never warm up to anyone? A sore thumb. As Tommy Lee's career developed, he became known for portraying men hardened by life.
We came down out of the mountains and then into the rolling hills and then into the desert.
Figures marked by authority, regret, and loss. The gravity audiences admired was not performed, it was lived. Recognition arrived, including major nominations and acclaim, but Jones remained private, reserved, and emotionally contained. For a man who built a career playing hardened figures, authority symbols, and men shaped by loss, the death of Tommy Lee Jones's daughter has brought a private grief that no performance could ever contain. Fame never softened him. Success never distracted him. The one place where his reserve lifted was his family, especially his children, who grounded him in a life otherwise defined by restraint and distance. Acting gave him purpose, but not joy. His roles were intense, demanding, and often bleak.
Yes. I've heard great things about it already. I know some people who have seen some research screenings. They said it's got everything all wrapped up into one movie.
The acclaim came, but it never appeared to define him. Awards were acknowledged, then set aside. He returned again and again to a quieter life away from attention. For all his discipline and control, Tommy Lee Jones never found lasting peace in love. His personal life followed the same pattern that marked much of his early years: intense beginnings, followed by fracture and distance. His first two marriages ended quietly, without explanation, reinforcing the sense that stability often slipped through his hands. Jones married his first wife, Kate Lardner, early in his adult life. She was already a mother to 2 young children, and while their union appeared promising from the outside, it remained largely private. The marriage produced no children of their own and ended after several years. No public reasons were given. Like many chapters of Jones's life, it closed without clarity or resolution. A few years later, he married again, this time to Kimberly Clafley. With her, Jones finally built the family that would become the center of his life. Together, they had 2 children, Austin and Victoria. For a time, the marriage endured, lasting longer than his first and offering something close to permanence. Yet even this relationship eventually broke down. The separation was described not in dramatic terms, but in the language of exhaustion, conflict, discord, and incompatibility. The marriage ended, leaving Jones once again alone. What remained after the divorces was not bitterness, but retreat. Jones did not remarry quickly or publicly. Instead, he withdrew further from attention, protecting the one thing that continued to give his life meaning: his children. They became his emotional anchor, the reason he stayed grounded, despite fame, acclaim, and a reputation for severity. While the world knew him as stern and unapproachable, those closest to him understood that fatherhood softened him in ways Nothing else could. As he grew older, Jones became even more private. He rarely addressed his personal life and never responded to speculation. That silence extended to rumors about his health. Because he shared so little, others filled the gaps with assumptions.
And now the memory of the dream has become a dream of its own.
Occasional public appearances sparked concern, but Jones never engaged with the speculation. He offered no explanations, no reassurances, and no denials. Silence remained his shield. It was his children who softened the edges of that world. While Jones rarely spoke publicly about them, those close to him understood their importance. They were his connection to something real, something untouched by performance or expectation. In an industry driven by ego, his children gave him balance. They were the reason he remained grounded, the reason he resisted excess, the reason he kept his life small and controlled despite enormous success. As he aged, the roles he chose began to reflect fatherhood and loss more directly. He portrayed men searching for missing children, men confronting the limits of authority, men weighed down by regret. These performances carried an emotional weight that felt lived rather than imagined. They were quiet, restrained, and devastating, much like the man himself. In recent years, he stepped back further from the public eye.
Yes, some of them wear neckties, and
His absence only deepened the sense of a man retreating inward, choosing privacy over performance. Whether intentional or necessary, the distance reflected a lifetime habit of carrying burdens alone. Now, with the loss of his daughter, that solitude carries a heavier meaning. The children who once gave him purpose, balance, and quiet happiness are no longer a complete refuge. For a man who struggled to sustain romantic love, fatherhood was the one relationship that endured until tragedy intervened. Tommy Lee Jones spent his life mastering restraint, but the loss of a child dismantles even the strongest defenses. What remains is not the actor, not the legend, but a father, living with an absence that no silence can protect him from. His children were the rare exception, the place where that hardness loosened, where joy entered quietly. What do you think was the hardest moment for Tommy Lee Jones in all of this? And how do you think losing his daughter will change him going forward? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.